Frankie's Corner, Frankie's Corner, join me now. Frankie's Corner. What's in the mailbox? What's in the mailbox? On Frankie's Corner.
Hello, welcome to another story time with Frankie. And what I'm going to do a little different today is we're going to do another behind the scenes thing. And so what I've got going on is a program that I started a little bit earlier. I started it from scratch, but the program crashed, and so I had to start over again. I was just doing a test drawing of a Snoopy, and we'll be doing a little animation. So I thought we might finish it up together. All right? Alright, we're picking back up with the clouds, and I'm starting to blend in the shadows with the highlights. And what I use here is a fingertip tool. Sometimes I use the blur, and sometimes I use the fingertip. The blur does just that. It blurs the two colors together, and the fingertip is just like dragging your finger across it. And then when I add in the highlights in front of a darker cloud, it will give a little impression of depth. Add a layer of the black at the bottom and then blur it between the two and slowly develop it. But some of the coolest parts about it is the where the brightest spots near the shadows in the center. It gives a real good dimension and sense of depth to it. You can layer in any number of layers. One of the things I like about doing clouds is very similar to doing trees, because there's not really a wrong way to do trees. And clouds are kind of the same way. Now let's zoom out and we can see where the colors that I've added in, we can blur those in. Interesting, a lot of people think that clouds are just different layers of black and white, but in fact, if you look carefully on most, especially sunrises or sunsets, there's any number of colors throughout a cloud. I'm going to do a little bit more on these clouds, and then we'll move on to something else here shortly. This program originally, like I said, was crashed, and I started it from scratch, but we'll do another here shortly. Adding a little highlight on the edges using the highlight tool, and then shadows on the bottom. When you highlight inside of a cloud like that, you can just limit your coloring to just that cloud if you choose the highlight button first. I zoom out a whole lot to get an idea of what it looks like from behind, and then further away you get a better idea of scale. Section up here needs to be a little bit lighter. It's a little too yellow. Highlight it and then blend it in. Might just leave that little line. Anything you make it look not symmetric, the more irregular you make it, the better, in my opinion. There's a Clip Studio Paint, the version that we're using. And forgive me, I've had to redub this audio back over top of the video. If you notice that sounds are not necessarily matching the video. This channel still is a work in progress, and so bear with me, but the audio was playing faster than the video. Didn't really find a good solution for it, so I thought, well, I'll just redub some audio over top of the video, and so in a way I'm watching this with you as together. And we thought we might show some different programs there, so save it first. And we're going to do a new program. Yeah, I thought I'd show you some beginnings of the program, or the drawing that I used to show all the time when I was doing art classes. And it's the same drawing I always began with. Snoopy, of course. So I always start with his ear, little dip, then the top of his head and his nose, or snout, I guess is the right word, his back and his feet. Interesting, a little note, my daughter drew this same profile picture of Snoopy when she was little, but she always drew it to the left, and I always drew him facing the right. Behind the scenes story about that is that when I was a kid, I was beginning to learn how to draw, or wanted to learn how to draw, and my mom had a wooden cutout of a keychain cutout of Snoopy, about this shape, and I would trace around it with a pencil until I got better and better and better at it, until I finally didn't need the keychain. Probably need to clean up some lines. Right there we're doing the difference between a vector eraser, and that was a vector layer, and now we're going to do a raster layer. And the difference is a vector layer, as you can blow it up and shrink it without losing resolution on the lines, but makes it really cool to do the drawing. And so I've softened the vector raster layer so that we could see it as an outline of my own drawing. It's an interesting way to trace a drawing using the vector layers. Notice I'm intentionally drawing the lines past where they go, and that'll really help when you go to finalize the drawing. So I intentionally go beyond it. And there's some different kinds of eyes that you can do. I always use the backward 6. You could do a forward 6. You do a slant. All sorts of different kinds of eyes. Hit the eraser button and we knock off the tails of those extra lines, and it makes for a very clean transition. Much harder to do in a raster layer. That line was a little bit crooked, so we highlight it, make it simplify tool. Then you can drag the actual points down to where you want. There's more than one way to do that. That's just the way that I've gotten used to doing it. Cutting up some of the lines there. cut it with just a normal eraser and then hit it with a vector eraser. Had to add his tummy and then clean off the vector lines. Time for the foot. Snoopy feet. Right side of the three-dimensional collar. I like adding those little 3D effects. Oh, we're adding in color now. Highlighting the section. The reason why I sometimes highlight in a section before I dump the color in it, if the lines aren't actually touching each other, the paint bucket will spill out over the whole background, and depending on the power of the computer, it could take a little bit for it to fill it all in. It just saves some time and just highlight it first and then fill it. I've struggled with that sometimes because even when the lines appear to be connected, they aren't. And of course, Snoopy's white. And we add all the little black details. When you add those black details, the 3D effect goes away. So we'll need to add a little different color for it to show up. Add a little highlight to start with on the top side. Now if you merge that vector layer with that raster layer before doing all this, then you wouldn't have that hard line. But Snoopy is okay to have hard lines, but you may not want them. And if you did, all you had to do is merge the two before you started doing highlights. Sometimes I highlight an area, and sometimes I'll just take the airbrush and just shoot it into that spot. Add a little highlight on his tail. Anything you do to make it look three-dimensional, or at least for me. You do your own thing. Some people like 2D flat drawings. I like shading. It's probably my favorite thing to do in drawings. I like the whole thing. You can move it around, shape it. Another vector layer. I'm going to add his doghouse, of course. You can use the straight line. I use that curved line a lot. One click and then curve it down. It's a little bit big. I intentionally go past the lines once again because it's easy to come back later and chop them off. The underside of the roof. Notice I outlined, using all my outlines in red, anticipating the color I want to use. Here you can click on a line and actually rotate it, move it. It's one of the cool things about vector lines that you cannot do in raster. Oh, you can, but it's much harder. Chop off the extra lines. Looking for the distortion tool, shortening it, twisting it, making the back side a little smaller than the front, making it look a little more 3D. In all fairness, really, at this angle, Snoopy ought to be turned a little more to the right, but this is just for an illustration and purposes. If I did it again and I wanted this angle, then Snoopy needed to be turned a little. Dropping into colors. had a little trouble getting it to drop in, even though the lines appeared connected, as I said earlier, because it would fill in the whole thing. So I'm going to end up having to use the select tool to select certain areas that I want to select. That little navigation window right there is a handy way of popping around. I use this tool a lot for blocking in. Third one down on the left. Same thing, I had trouble with filling too much that I didn't want it to fill. So I had to use the selection tool again. I could have figured out where the hole was, but it's just faster to just go ahead and use the selection tool. Get your a little darker color. I hardly ever shadow with just black. Usually I take a darker color, darker shade of the color that you're already using. It's more natural. Underneath the roof will be the darkest part of it. Adding in some roof lines now. Using that same straight line tool with curve. Went a little too far right there. It's another way to get rid of a line. Just airbrush over it with the background color. I'm going to use the lasso. Makes curved lines. Then we can hit the fill button and fill it with black. And then we can do another little line inside to show where the light is pouring in, and so the floor of the doghouse will be a little bit lighter. Gives it a 3D effect. Set Snoopy back on, move him around. Try to decide if I want him in front of it or behind it. Side it in front, kind of rotate him back a little bit. And that's pretty much it. You got to sign it, of course. Come up with your own signature. Let's see if there's something else that we can find. I'll show you something else that real quick before the end of the video to show you something else that I've done recently. And there's Frankie on his street corner. This particular scene I did for the Frankie Goes to School, using the same program, the same techniques that we just watched with Snoopy. Thank you for coming with me. And there's my cat, Snoop. She sort of takes care of me around here. Thanks for watching.